at this point. So I will give you a minute to make sure you click on your microphones, mute yourselves.
No, you just muted Xenia. Okay. How's Xenia?
Okay, I unmuted myself. It's fine. Okay. I am Xenia Cohn, president of the Livona chapter of Hadassah Israel, and I want to welcome you all here this evening. Since the war broke out, our group has had to rethink many events in our very active chapter. Hadassah Israel started an emergency campaign for the intensive care units at Hadassah Medical Center to help pay for medical supplies at this critical time. If you have not done so already, please consider making a donation to this vital campaign by contacting any one of us. Thank you. Since we are struggling at this difficult time, we felt that there was a need to get some expert advice on coping with the current situation. I want to thank Rose Charlotte for suggesting Dr. Bella Shanzer in setting up this program. Before we turn over the program to Rose, let's take a moment to say a prayer for the hostages, which I will say in English, followed by the prayer for the Chayalim, said in Hebrew by Aaron Israel. Thank you. May the one who blessed Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo bless, watch, and guard those missing from the Israel Defense Forces and all of the captives, among others of our brethren of the house of Israel, that are situated in distress and in captivity. On account of this group's praying for them, may the Holy One, blessed be He, grant mercy upon them, take them out from darkness and gloom, break their chains, redeem them from their ordeals, and return them quickly to the comfort of their families. Let them praise the Lord for His kindness and His wondrous deeds for the children of man. And through them, let the verse be fulfilled, and the Lord's ransom shall return and come with shouting to Zion, crowned with joy everlasting. They shall attain joy and gladness, while sorrow and sighing flee. And let us say amen.
Amen. Yisheberach Avotenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'yivarech et chayalei tzva hagana Yisrael ha'olam mishmar artzeinu v'yarei Eloheinu min halvanon v'yad midbar Mitzrayim u'min hayom hagadol ad lavo ha'arva u'b'chol makom shehem b'yabasha ba'avir u'vayam Yitein Adonai et oivenu hakomim aleinu nigafim lifneihem HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmor v'yatzil et chayaleinu mikol tzara v'tzukah mikol nega u'machla Yishlach bracha v'yatzlacha b'chol maaseh yideihem. Yad be'ersonenu tachtem yatveim b'cheter Yeshua v'teretz nitzachon yikuyam bohem ha'katuv. Ki Adonai Elohechem ha'olech imachem v'lachem lachem.
They're advertising, you understand? They're telling me all the things that they do. They want me to join. This is not what I'm looking for. You got very close to it. Can't see what it says.
Philip. Okay. Rose.
Okay.
Rose, will you take over the program, but you have to unmute yourself? Thanks, Rhonda and Aaron. I first met Bella Shanzer when we moved across the street from her family in Elizabeth, New Jersey in 1983. I knew then that she was going to do some very important things, very, very accomplished things. Dr. Bella Shanzer is a board-certified general adult psychiatrist who has spent the last 20 years providing evidence-based holistic care.
Everybody can hear you talking, everything you're saying.
We're
On the
on.
very top, touch a little, and a microphone will appear, and hit the microphone and you'll be muted.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rose. I'm going to continue, but I'm going to start again. Dr. Bella Shanzer is a board-certified general adult psychiatrist who has spent the last 20 years providing evidence-based holistic care to individuals struggling with mental illness. Dr. Shanzer graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Barnard College, and AOA, that's the medical school equivalent of Phi Beta Kappa, from Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons. She was chief at mental health at the Detroit Veterans Administration Medical Center. And prior to moving to Israel, Dr. Shanzer was vice chair for clinical affairs, Baylor School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry. This is a very, very abbreviated list of her accomplishments. Dr. Shanzer is proudest of the fact that she is a mother of 4 teenagers / young adults, ages 15, 16, 18, and 20 years old. And they have taught her more about caring than any other experience in her life. Today, Dr. Shanzer has a private practice in Renana. So before I turn over the program to Dr. Bella Shanzer, please make sure your devices are muted if you haven't done so already. And if you have any questions for Dr. Shanzer, she is going to answer them. Put your questions in the chat group, and at the end of the program, she'll take questions. And if you can't use the chat group, you can raise your hand. Dr. Shanzer, it's my pleasure to introduce you.
Well, Rose, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, and I can't believe that it's been that many years. 1983. Now I really feel old. But yes, I have distinct memories of when you guys moved in across the street from us, and it's lovely to know that we are neighbors again in the land of Israel. And to all of you on the Zoom, my family made Aliyah about 3.5 years ago. And living through war makes you a native, even if you weren't born here. So it's really been quite an experience. And I would say that probably everybody on this Zoom has not slept in the last 6 weeks. And even if you are not directly, meaning you don't have a soldier in your family, just living in the land of Israel right now makes you have skin in the game. Right? Just waking up every day and living your life when our country is under attack, when our people are under attack, creates a situation in which there is anxiety. And based on some of the articles that I've read about what's going on with prescriptions in Israel, it looks like everybody is suffering from the same thing. There's just a general sense of worry, which is completely understandable. And one of the hardest things about managing anxiety during a time where anxiety is the norm is exactly that. I was speaking to a supervisor of mine, kind of asking what I might do to help, when generally speaking in psychiatry, our job is to help move people from a state of fantasy or illogicality to a state of reality or logic. And in this case, it's the reverse. We're trying to get people to a degree ignore the reality of their situation in an attempt to reduce the anxiety that's actually quite normative given the situation. So that aside, it is still important to function. And I think from my perspective, that is the most critical element of anything that we're going to talk about tonight, is making sure that we are functioning. Can I tell you to not worry? That would be ridiculous, and you'd stop trusting me. Especially if you have a soldier in your family, you're going to be worried. You're going to be worried. How can I tell my friends whose sons are in Gaza not to worry? That would be ridiculous. But I can make sure that they can function. And when you guys hopefully end tonight, when you are thinking about what we speak about this evening, you will come away with thinking, okay, I might be worried, but I can still function. So what does it mean to function? So the first thing is to breathe. So interestingly, something that we sometimes forget to do is breathe. When we are very worried, when we are anxious, we start breathing more rapidly. And this is something that happens without us even controlling it. Why? Because when we are afraid, we are really turning on a switch that's quite adaptive. It's our alarm switch. It's our brain telling us, you're in danger. You need to do something. You either need to run away, you need to fight, or you need to, what humans do also is freeze, but you're doing something. And that something usually entails getting your heart rate up, right? Because either if you're gonna fight, you need to have your heart rate going so that you have the strength to punch somebody. If you're gonna run away, you need to have your heart rate going so you can get blood to your legs so that you can run. And even freezing to a degree, it's like when your heart starts to race, less blood gets to your brain, the oxygen levels in your brain go down, and then your brain kicks in your breathing, and it just makes you start breathing more quickly in an attempt to get more oxygen into your system. And then in a very frustrating cycle, as you start breathing more rapidly and your heart rate is going more rapidly, again, in an attempt to give you more oxygen, your brain starts saying, oh, wait a second, my heart's going really quickly. I must be in danger. And then it just keeps it going. And then you end up in this cycle where you become anxious, and then you can't stop feeling anxious because your brain thinks that you're in danger. The one vital sign that we can control is our breathing. We can't control our heart rate, actually. We can't control where our blood goes, but we can't control how much we sweat. These are all the things we can't control our temperature, but we can control our breathing. So the first thing I want you all to do is to take a deep breath. In my opinion, in my experience, the best way to take a deep breath that actually works is to also close your eyes. Why? Because it reduces the sensory input into your brain, which is just another way to help reduce your brain's thinking that something's wrong. You're not looking at anything, you just see black, it's actually calming. So I'd like everybody to close their eyes, breathe in through your nose, and now take a deep breath out, blow it out. Now do that again. Now, I bet you all feel just a smidge more relaxed. And we really haven't done much of anything except for breathe. Just look what taking a deep breath in and of itself can do for you as a way to reduce your baseline anxiety. You just feel, first of all, it expands your chest. You sit up stronger, straighter. When you take a deep breath, you're no longer sort of hunched over. Just think, right? If you think about anxiety as the body's way of protecting you from danger, and you're going to run or fight, when you run or fight, you're hunched over. You're all like, you make yourself small, right? Because you're trying to defend yourself. You're trying to run away. You take a deep breath, you have to stand straighter because you need to expand your lungs to the fullest capacity, which requires your chest to be its full dimensional length, right? And so you have to stand up straight. You take a deep breath, immediately you feel better. If there's nothing else then you take away from this evening is to remember to breathe. When you start having those feelings of something's wrong, I'm worried, just stop for a second and breathe. Close your eyes. It's really nice if you can breathe in through your nose, because then the air gets a little warmed. So feels even better than when it's cold air. And if you can get yourself to count to 5, so you breathe in and then breathe out, you will immediately feel a slight sense of relaxation. And I would say that this is a great technique, by the way, to use if you have to speak in public, or if you have to go somewhere that makes you a little anxious, having nothing to do with what's going on in Israel right now. Just take some deep breaths. And if you can close your eyes, so much the better. So that's the first thing. And really, that's the biggest take home. Remember to breathe. Okay, so now I have you breathing, you're sitting up straight, you're feeling marginally a little bit more relaxed. You're actually even open more to hearing things because your brains are not going like this as much. The next thing that a person can do, just physically, and the reason why I'm focusing on the physical stuff first is because that's the easiest things for us to control, right? When you're thinking about something, you're worrying about something, it's very hard to stop, especially if somebody tells you not to worry, you're going to worry even more probably. But we can control our physical bodies, just like we can control our breathing. The other thing we can control to a degree is how tight our muscles feel, right? And this also affects the way our brain interprets information and the way it interprets danger. Again, think about this is why I really want you to think about what anxiety means. If you need to run or fight, you're going to clench your muscles. right? Because you need to stand in that posture in order to run or fight. We counter that by forcibly relaxing our muscles. So we hyper clench and then we relax. So I want you all, everybody on the Zoom, I want you to do this. I want you to take your fist and make it as tight as you possibly can imagine making it. And then very slowly expand out your hand, just very slowly. You'll even feel it tingling a little bit. And it just feels a little lighter, a little looser, a little bit limp. It feels a little bit more relaxed. And now you can go and do that with every muscle group. You can do your feet. And so you can do this even if you're having a conversation with somebody. You can just, if you're wearing shoes or socks, you can start clenching your toes and relaxing them. And you can clench your leg muscles and relax them. You can do one at a time. You can do it all together. Slowly going through each muscle group and relaxing it. Again, it sends a different message to your brain. You're basically trying to redirect your brain and get it to not be afraid anymore. You're no longer in danger. I don't need to be all clenched up. Okay? And so this is really important because our bodies are in a constant state of biofeedback. Our brain is listening to our bodies and our bodies are listening to our brains, and it's interpreting information that it's getting. If we can send the brain different information that we are not in danger, it will by default start feeling less worried. Okay, so now we're doing the deep breathing exercises, we're doing the relaxation exercises. Those are, I consider, very low hanging fruit. Why? You don't need to be trained, you don't need to do practice, you don't need to have a PhD in anything, you just need to have a body and be able to breathe and contract your muscles. Right? Beyond those two things, there are obviously a lot of other techniques that are incredibly helpful in terms of relaxation. One of them is doing mindfulness techniques, anything in the realm of meditation. They call it mindful meditation. This is really, really helpful, a little bit more difficult, okay? Because ultimately you need to sort of get your mind to go blank. And I mean, I'd be curious if anybody can even do that for 5 seconds, let alone a minute, let alone 5 minutes. But certainly working on that is very helpful. And a technique that, and you can go online and there are tons of resources online to help with mindful meditation. I would say that in Judaism, we have something called tefillah, and that's what tefillah ultimately is. Okay, so tefillah is a form of mindful meditation. Now, it doesn't feel that way to us because a lot of times we do it by rote and we don't think of it as an opportunity to actually cut off, turn inwards and relax ourselves. But in the ideal world, that's actually what it means to have kavanah while davening, while being mitpalel, to be mitkaven, to be intentional and focused while praying. That is a form of mindful meditation. But again, it's very hard, it's difficult, but it is certainly a tool. If you can access it, that's a fantastic tool. And if you can do it 3 times a day, you just bought yourself 3 times a day where you have very intentionally reduced your anxiety levels. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff online, but essentially it has to do with shutting your mind down, focusing, turning inwards. It's too long for us in this short period of time to really work on, but that is an excellent anti-anxiety technique. Okay, so we're breathing, our muscles are loose, we're even trying to be mindful, stay in the moment. And in general, just staying in the moment means pulling your brain back from where it goes off to, back to where you are. Okay, so these are all very low-hanging, nice things that you can do in any moment, at any time to help you relax. What are some bigger, more really, I think, very important things to make sure you're doing on a day-to-day as kind of kavua things in your schedule to help you? And I'm going to use the airplane industry as my example, because I think the airline industry came up with one of the most therapeutically minded ideas when they demonstrate how to put on oxygen masks. So I don't know when the last time any of you traveled, but inevitably the stewardess or steward gets up and they hold up that little card and they say, even if you've been on a plane before, we want you to pay attention. And they point out that the mother or the parent puts on the guardian, who's ever the adult in the situation, puts on the oxygen mask first, and then you put the oxygen mask on the child. Now, you may be wondering, like, why is this so wonderful? This seems very counter to every Jewish mother instinct of, first, let me give it to my child. I'm going to self-sacrifice so my child can have oxygen. Well, the reason why it's so important is because the airline industry is telling us something critical, is that if you don't have oxygen, if you're not breathing, neither is your child. And the only way to make sure your child has oxygen is if you're breathing oxygen first. And this is such an important thing to remember, especially for grandparents. Right? See, I realize that many of the people on this Zoom are grandparents. And grandparents are in this kind of odd position where you need to support. You're not allowed to necessarily have an opinion, but you need to be supportive for everybody that's dealing with everything. And I know a lot of you are probably hosting daughters, daughter-in-laws, grandchildren, the kid in caboodle, right? And you need to be there to give support. But who's supporting you? Because you can't give support if you're not being supported. Hence the oxygen. Hence self-care. And I can't stress this enough. And I sort of came up with this little mantra for myself, that self-care is not being selfish, it's being self-aware. It's realizing what you need to maintain your oxygen so that you can give oxygen to everybody else in your family. And that is so, so important. So important. And I love it. I love that the stewardess is the one who really, I mean, this is really where I learned it from. I didn't learn it from medical school or my residency. I learned it from traveling on planes. So what does it mean to take care of yourself? So self-care is different for each person, but there are some basic trends. There are some basic things that every human being needs in order to make sure that they have the inner core to support their extended family. Because I know that all of you guys are supporting extended families right now. Because I'm sure you guys are like all the grandparents I see in Renana who literally have like 5 generations living in their homes right now, plus the pet dog. Number 1, sleep. Make sure you are sleeping. Now, sleep is always a little dicey, especially as we get older. Our sleep needs change. They vary. Sometimes we need to take naps during the day. Sometimes we need more sleep at night. But regardless of how you slice it or dice it up, you need to make sure you're sleeping. So number 1, and this is going to be very difficult for everybody, the phone cannot be going off in your room all night long. Okay. There's something called the do not disturb breakthrough numbers, where you can set up do not disturb that only certain numbers are allowed to get through. I know that everybody has a few numbers right now that are critical. They need to be called by these numbers, whatever's going on. And I respect that. And I will not tell anybody not to have those numbers come through on their phone. You don't need to hear from anybody else. You don't need to get the alert from Arut Sheva at 2 in the morning that something happened. It's not going to make a difference if you find out about it at 7 in the morning. I promise it'll still have happened. So figure out a way to diminish the phone as an intrusion on sleep, even with everything that's going on. And in terms of hearing the sirens, trust me, you'll hear the siren if it goes off while you're sleeping. And to quote my neighbor, who, because I'm embarrassed to say we did not hear the siren that went off at 6:30 in the morning, she's like, wow, you guys sleep really well. So sirens are really, really loud, except apparently in the Morgan home. You'll hear the siren. So don't stay in that like sort of semi-sleep because you're worried that you might miss the siren, and go to sleep. I mean, these sirens are loud. Nobody misses them. Shut off the phone. Don't worry about the sirens and go to sleep. Have a good nighttime ritual. The brain likes consistency. That's how it develops. We all like routine. Okay? That's what's honestly the hardest thing about what's going on, is that nobody knows from day to day what's going to happen, right? That's the ultimate, everybody wakes up and you're like, what's going to happen today? Right? And that's very hard for a human brain to tolerate. We like to be able to plan. We like to know. And so similarly, the brain likes to know that it's time for bed. The more you create a routine, the more you train your brain for sleep, the easier it'll be to fall asleep. And that routine can be anything: a cup of tea, a book, music, anything that's not too visually stimulating. So no Candy Crush before bed. Please do not look at the news for a half an hour before sleep. I see somebody smiling there. The key is we want to let your brain shut itself off naturally so that you can sleep. That said, if you are really struggling with sleep after working on what we call your sleep hygiene, That also means, despite the fact that I'm drinking Diet Coke right now, that means no caffeine late in the afternoon or evening, no big meals after 8 o'clock. Like, these are all kind of the usual things, but certainly right now we're so overstimulated that we have to kind of double down on things that'll help us shut our brains off. Then you speak to your doctor about sleep aids. Okay? There are tons of over-the-counter things that can be taken. That's always my preference. I'm a big believer in using over-the-counter, non-habit forming interventions for sleep. Melatonin is fantastic, quite frankly, for this type of situation. And I realize it's a little bit more difficult in Israel to get melatonin, but generally speaking, depending on your age, if you're over 65, it's easier to get it, or you can have somebody bring it in from the United States where they sell it in jugs at Costco. So think about, but again, I always say, do the sleep hygiene first, and I'm going to throw it, since I think my father's on this, Bernard Shanzer. I don't even know if he remembers telling me this, but I quote him because I love it. And I've actually told this to patients of mine myself, that he used to tell patients to read from Leviticus or Vayikra before sleep, because it is the most boring section of the Torah. And I would for sure concur with that. So when in doubt, read Sefer Vayikra. It'll definitely put you to sleep. All right, next. Now we're breathing, we're muscle relaxing, we're sleeping. Nutrition. And the other thing that gets forgotten when we are anxious is how to eat properly. We're either overeating because we're stress eating, or we're skipping meals because we're nauseous. Your brain needs glucose. It needs protein. It needs regular meals. It just does. It does not function well. You know, there's like this hangry thing. They make commercials for a chocolate bar for it. I'm not saying that. I don't know if the chocolate bar is the best thing to satisfy that, but that's you get more irritable when you're hungry, right? Little kids, you know, when they're starting to get hungry is when they like start having temper tantrums because they're hungry, because their brains need glucose. Don't deny your brain its nutrients. It needs nutrition. It needs healthy eating habits. This is all part of self-care. Really, really important. Right? So, and I would say that in terms of managing, if your household has more people in it than normal, take turns coming up with the menus. Make it part of the activity. It's a great activity for little kids. Incorporate them into the cooking. Teach them how to make something. Have them make chocolate chip cookies, or have them bread the schnitzel, or have them cut up the cucumbers if they're old enough to use a knife. Mealtime can actually be both an activity and also a way to decompress. You can engage in casual conversation, and it is ultimately very good for you. You need to be eating 3 meals a day, at least. All right. Then exercise. Exercise gets the body's natural endorphins going. We all have adrenaline, noradrenaline. These are the body's own neurotransmitters that help us with mood enhancement. When we exercise and we get our heart rate up, we also increase our adrenaline. You hear me say, oh, I got my adrenaline up. There's really something to that. It really helps. In fact, they've done studies that have shown that exercise can help reduce anxiety. Running, walking. It's exercise, by the way, it's like literally a win-win. There's no downside to exercise. It's good for your hearts. It's good for your hips. It's good for your anxiety. It's just all good all around. Taking a walk every day, outside, fresh air, you've like no downside. And then throw in the next thing, which is getting sunlight. Okay, there you go. Exercise outside, you check. So what does sunlight have? Sunlight generates vitamin D. We've also know that vitamin D helps with mood enhancement. Again, these are all studies that I'm not saying any rocket science, but these are things that have been studied at this point. There are higher rates of depression during the winter. In northern countries, they have higher rates of suicide. There's a whole seasonal affective disorder, which is a disorder in which you become depressed when it's darker outside, is specifically because of our positive response to sunlight. And this spring fever is because people used to become manic during the summer when the days were longer, they were exposed to more sun. Take advantage of the fact that we live in Israel. I realize this week, of course, it's predicting rain every day, but last week was amazing. It was beautiful and sunny, right? Just being outside. I remember there was one day where I was running a support group in Rana, and the woman said, she's like, I can't be upset today. It's too nice out. I'm like, exactly. Bingo. Right. So you take a walk outside, you get your heart rate up, you get vitamin D. It's almost impossible to not smile even for a minute. And then if you can do that while talking to another human being, so now jumping to social connections, wow, now you've hit the lottery. Okay, so why are social connections so important, especially in a time like this? I'm sure that all of you, especially people who are in Israel, seger after seger, where you were not allowed to connect with anybody other than the person who happened to be sleeping in your house next to you. That was very, very difficult. It was definitely one of the major drivers of the increased rates of depression and anxiety. Beyond the fear of the illness was the fact that people were cut off socially from their friends, where they couldn't see people. They couldn't have that most basic need addressed, which is connecting with another human being. Social connections help reduce anxiety. You sit and you talk to somebody else, all of a sudden you're not as burdened. I will say I never really fully understood this much. So there's an idea in Judaism, I'm sure you're all familiar, that when you go visit a sick person, they say you take away a 60th of their illness. I never really understood that. It didn't make any sense to me as a scientist. What do you mean you take away 60th of their illness? They're still sick. It was not until I really started thinking about during COVID, when we lost social connections, that I realized what the Chachamim, the rabbis were saying. It's not, of course, the person still has their physical illness. You're not taking away their temperature. You're taking away a little bit of the burden of their illness. When you go to visit somebody who's sick, they feel imperceptibly a little lighter because now somebody is sharing how they're feeling. When you talk to another person and you share how you're feeling, you're not carrying the burden yourself. All of a sudden, somebody else is carrying the burden with you. And you know what? It's lighter then. It's easier to carry. And even if you're both carrying burdens, amazingly enough, somebody else often feels that another person, it's easier for them to carry my burden and it's easier for me to carry their burden. Why? Because they're not carrying around all my other stuff, right? And sharing your distress with another person makes it easier to handle. This is just the truth of life. Think about it for yourself. The last time you told a friend of yours something that was really troubling you, how you felt after you spoke to them. And I'm not talking about talking to a professional. I'm talking about just talking to a friend, right? Sharing distress makes it easier. Takes away a 60th. So now if you get a good night's sleep, you eat 3 meals a day, you take a walk outside with your friend, you're already so far ahead of everybody else that you can't help but feel a little better. Does it change what's going on in the country? No. Does it make sure that your grandson is safe? It most certainly does not. Does it make it easier to get through the day? It most certainly does. Because that's our job right now. Right? Anybody who's here, our job is to make sure we live. Our job is to make sure we function. Our job is to make sure that the state of Israel is still here for when everybody comes back. And in order to do that, we need to take care of ourselves so that we can be ready to take care of everybody else. So these are some ways to take care of yourself. Again, this is not rocket science, but sometimes we forget about the most basic things that are right there for us to take. The things, low-hanging fruit that we don't even think about, that don't even cross our minds because they seem silly, right? Shouldn't I be doing some highfalutin, moving my eyes a certain way or jumping up and down 20 times? No, just breathe, relax your muscles, eat, sleep, get together with people, take a walk. Now, obviously, this is not to address people who have what I consider pathological anxiety, meaning their anxiety has affected them to the degree that they're no longer functioning. In that case, and if you know somebody who has reached that point, they need to see a professional. They don't necessarily need medication, but they probably should see a professional. And they might need medication even in the short term. And that's fine. There's a reason why the rates of prescriptions in Israel have skyrocketed over the last few weeks. But on a day-to-day, these things are great things to do just to help you function. If you're not so to speak, over the edge, if you just are struggling like everybody else. Okay, those are some generic things for everybody. In terms of how to help your children. So again, I know Rose told me that a lot of the people on the Zoom are grandparents. And grandparents right now are playing a very unique role. Not that they haven't played this before, but so much more so that, I mean, I know that daughters and daughter-in-laws have moved into homes with their children because so many of the husbands and fathers are in reserves and on Miluim. And this is a situation that really blindsided most people because we've gotten used to the fact that Miluim didn't need to be called up. And now all of a sudden you're in a situation where you need to support your daughters and daughter-in-laws and your grandchildren. And that's hard when you're not used to doing it 24/7. It's one thing to do it, for a couple hours once a week. It's another thing to have people in your home. I would say that that is a particularly difficult phenomena, but it's manageable. And so how do we manage this new shape of our lives that we don't know how long it's going to last for? And I'm highlighting that because, again, coming back to what I mentioned earlier about the not knowing, that's part of it. Most people, when you go to an exercise class, you notice instructors will oftentimes count, right? Why do they count? Like, couldn't they just set at a certain point, say, okay, you're done? And the mean ones don't count, by the way, because they want to torture you a little bit. But the good ones count. Why? Because you can do almost anything. You can get through almost anything if you know when it's going to end. Hey, I only have 10. I can do this. I can push myself for 10 seconds. I can push myself for 8 reps. But not knowing, it's very, very difficult. It's hard to plan. It's hard to know, well, am I supposed to do this is this a 2-day thing, or is this like a 2-year thing, or somewhere in between? Who knows? Right. So that's part of the stress. So on a day-to-day, one of the really important things, getting back to sort of the oxygen on the plane motif, is first of all, really being aware of what you can handle at any given time and any given space. So if you know that you need quiet time for yourself so that you can then be present for the next 4 hours, then tell somebody, your daughter, your daughter-in-law, you know what, from 2 to 3 every day, that's the time that I need to close the door so that I can help you all the other hours. And vice versa. Your daughter or daughter-in-law may also need quiet time, and you guys may need to negotiate who has quiet time when. This is a real thing. One of the things we tend to do, and especially I find Jewish moms, although this is not to exclude Jewish dads, we do tend to sort of take on a lot with the belief that it's going to be fine. It'll be fine. I'll be fine. My daughter needs me. I'll be fine. Well, until you're not fine, right? And then it becomes very hard to reestablish the boundaries. It's really good sometimes to think about it in advance. What can I do? What can I handle? And you can all handle a tremendous amount. You really can. I mean, I think that's what we are all seeing is how much we can handle. It's quite incredible. But everybody has their limits. And part of managing anxiety during this time is being really self-aware about your own personal bandwidth, because everybody's bandwidth is different. And it's really important not to compare and contrast. I mean, I hear this all the time. Oh, well, I'm on this. And I say to people constantly, this is not a subjective reality show. Everybody has what they have, and everybody deals with what they can deal with in their way. And it's not my place to tell you that you should have a bandwidth this big when everybody has the capacity that they have. And being aware of your capacity actually allows you to be a better support when needed than ignoring your capacity and pushing yourself to the point where you're no longer functional. This is really, really an important thing. And again, this is not selfishness. And I really want to stress that, because that's kind of always like, well, should I remember one of my moms she's like, well, I don't think I can go get coffee with a friend because what do you mean you can't go with your friend? Like, you think the 30 minutes you're having coffee with a friend is making you a bad mom? Is making you not a worried mom? No, you're realizing that those 30 minutes that you're having coffee with your friend, now you can go home, you can be a fantastic grandma, and you can make sure that your sons are being taken care of because you took those 30 minutes to have a cup of coffee with your friends. This is really, really important. And not to judge yourself about things that you can and cannot do. This is, I can't stress this enough, because we end up causing ourselves distress by making ourselves feel bad about things that really we shouldn't be worrying about to begin with. Okay. So it's, I'm looking at my New York Times. It's 8:15. I'm certainly happy to go on and talk a little bit more about some other things about your like sort of grandchildren and children in terms of what to look for, but I'm also happy to start taking questions so that because I do want to be mindful of the time.
So first of all, I want to thank you, Bella. And if anybody has a question, is anybody prepared for a question? If not, I'm very willing to start with what I'm struggling with, because I get the feeling like I'm in the similar kind of situation as the steps, the many steps of grief, because we started out in shock and in fear. Then we switched to the unknown. Then we switched to the beginning of the war and that stress. And then we switched to the hostages. And now we're at the war again and back to the unknown. And that's really what I'm struggling with. And I don't know if you have any comments or insights. I recognize very strongly what you're suggesting, your takeaways, but that's my thought process.
So I would say first, yes. So what you're describing, I think, is very spot on. And I think, you know, the ceasefire was very important. Obviously, we got a lot of hostages back. So I think from a humanitarian perspective, for our humanitarian crisis, it was very important. From a psychological perspective, I think it made things a bit more challenging, exactly to what you're describing, because it sort of gave this weird pause where you're like, oh, okay, I don't need to be worried. So I'm worried right now. And now all of a sudden it's like, wow, we got slapped in the face again. And I think the process that you're describing of going from this intense shock, and then things sort of going like this, and then like this, and this, again, this feeling of, well, where is it heading? And how long am I supposed to feel this way, is a very, very difficult issue. And certainly is one of the hardest parts, I think, of what's going on. To the degree that you can create daily routine and structure for yourself is helpful, right? Because the outside world is something that we have no control over. And that is what is so hard right now, is that the outside world is a state of chaos. It's chaos. And quite frankly, in America, it's chaos, it's just chaos. And this sense of, well, what's going to happen next? And what am I going to be feeling? And who's going to do something to me now? There's no way for us to handle that. Our human brains were not meant to really handle such disarray and such horribleness, for lack of a better word. I mean, it's just horrible. That's the only way to describe it. It is horrible. What we are all going through is horrible. But so what we can do is create a little shelter for ourselves underneath this, because this we can't change. And this is going to be like this for the time being. And it's going to be better days and worse days, and there may be another ceasefire, and that, right? And we have no idea. And so part of it is stepping away from the external world that surrounds us and creating a little cocoon inside that, where we can at least have some sense of normalcy. I call it like being normal in an abnormal world. And that's really what we're striving for. Right? And these activities that I described, the reason why I focus on those is because those are things you can do regardless of what's going on, right? You can take a walk. Well, okay, if it's pouring rain, so you can take a walk around your house, but thankfully it doesn't generally rain every day, right? Like talking to a friend is something you can do, whatever's going on. And I'm a big believer in making these things kavua, right? So because that helps, it gives them anchors. And then, you know, on Tuesday at 3 o'clock is when I go for my walk. And you make it sacrosanct. Like my children know that they do not talk to me in the morning. I mean, I wake up before them so that I can do this without them bothering me. I exercise every morning. That is my sacred time. Don't talk to me during my exercise time. If I don't get to exercise in the morning, not a good day for Bella Shanzer, and not a good day for Bella's kids. Making things sacrosanct and sort of sacred, so that you know that on this day I do this with this person, and respecting it, meaning not letting it be pushed aside, really, really helps, right? So we create a sense of order and normalcy for ourselves. How that looks for you is going to be a little different than how it looks for your neighbor. But the key is to give yourself something, because that's part of the problem, is that there's a sense of like free floating, that I have nothing holding me down because the world just seems to be spinning on its axis. So in response, that we have to create our own little anchors, things that we feel like, okay, I know that on this day, this is what I'm going to do. Like if there's a shiur that you like to go to, start going to it again. Make it part of your schedule. Creating a schedule, and it doesn't have to be rigid. Obviously, there's still things that are going to come up, right? Like, let's say you get called, you can go see your grandsons. You're going to drop everything and go see them. You should drop everything and go see them, right? But short of that, have things that you respect your own time. Most of us, by the way, don't respect our own time, which is part of the problem. And so we don't respect the things that we feel are important. But if you make it, this is the idea, by the way, there's so much wisdom in Judaism, I have to say. I'm a big fan of Jewish religion and of the wisdom inherent in it. The idea of being kovei zman laTorah is kovei zman. What it's really saying is establishing set times for things, make sure you do them. Right? If you don't set a time, you're saying, oh, I'll do it later. It'll never, trust me, later will never happen. But if you say that at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, this is what I'm going to do, you know what? You're going to do it at 1 o'clock on Tuesday. So that's just
And
a
that's
little
perfect. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone else that has a question or a comment that they want to make?
Oh, there are actually two things. For when you have a married daughter who's got a son and a son-in-law, and she is so, and when I offer, can I help you with this or that, or, oh no, no, I'm fine. But I know that she's on such system overload, and I don't know how I can approach her to say, what can I do to help you? Even because in the past, she's always said, no, I'm fine. But I know from what her kids say that she is running in 25 million directions to do this and do this and do this and do this for, and I don't know if there is anything that you can suggest to us as grandparents.
So I would start by maybe circumventing her, and start by maybe help, like doing stuff with the kids, right? So sometimes the best way around a parent is to go around the parent. And especially if your grandchildren are old enough to have a like inclusive of their mom, just start with that, almost without her noticing, so to speak, or just say, you know what, I'm taking the kids out for an hour without asking, right? Just sort of informing, not in a disrespectful type of way. I'm not saying that you should step on your daughter's toes, or right, but just, and don't give her the chance, because to say no, right? That's basically what what the idea is. Because if she's somebody who doesn't like to get help, it's going to be very hard for her to accept help. Right? And that's a separate, and like accepting help, by the way, is a whole separate talk. Letting people help you is actually quite important. It's good for you, and it's actually very good for the other person. But if she's somebody who feels like it's a sign of weakness or whatever, who knows why people don't want to be helped? There's asking her constantly is just going to make her annoyed. She'll be like, okay, I already said I want to help. Right. So don't ask, just do. See, and if your grandchildren are telling you, that's fantastic, by the way. And so find out from them, like, how, do you want to, or just like say, we're going to go to the pizza store tonight for dinner, right? We're going to, and just, in the space of somebody not being willing to accept help, sometimes you just have to sort of proactively do and don't ask, or they get permission, ask for an apology after the fact. Don't ask for permission in advance. I'm not saying it correctly, but you know what I'm saying. Ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission.
We actually did start doing a movie night and dinner night and game night. We do it once a week with the grandchildren, and we figured it's just time that their parents don't have to deal with them, even though they're not babies anymore, but just to have some space. But okay. Yeah.
And the other thing is sometimes sometimes people really need to be like directed in terms of that. So you tell her, you get her a gift card for something.
Mhm.
I made you an appointment for a manicure. This is
Mhm.
when and where. And I'm going to take the kids during that time. Things like that, where essentially she can't say no. Because if you,
Mhm.
if you see that she needs support, and I'm sure she does, because she's like every other sort of mom who all of a sudden became solo parenting, it is very challenging. It's very challenging. And so kind of just intervening is helpful. And also sharing these kind of advices with her, and says, just have a challenge, like, how many hours are you sleeping? How are you doing? That's the other thing, is sometimes we just need to have conversations. I was meeting with parents of younger children, and they were asking, well, how should I talk to my kids about what's going on? So firstly, you have to talk to them. Right? Sometimes you just need to sit around the dining room table. That's what I was saying about like making a meal together, because there's a certain casual air that occurs when you're just chopping and cutting and cooking, and you say, like, how are things going? I noticed that, this, or what have you been thinking about? What have you been hearing? Getting her to talk about how she's feeling, rather than asking if she needs help, is a nicer way to get her to actually open up. And then once she starts talking about how she's feeling, then you can sort of say, oh, well, maybe it would be helpful if does that make sense? Just strategically.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. I do have one other thing, and I don't know if other people are feeling this way, but I've always considered myself to be a person who does not hate. It takes a lot for me to hate. And this war for me I have such anger and hate for our enemies right now. And I don't like the way it makes me feel, and yet I feel that hate is justified. So this is something that I'm struggling with. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, or how I look at it.
I mean, that's such an excellent sort of comment, question. I'm not sure how, because I think probably we're all feeling that a little bit. And I think I would say that for myself personally, that's one of the hardest things, is that you don't want to feel that way about other human beings. So, and I think a lot of us then say, well, they're not human beings, so it's okay to, but it doesn't really make you feel, but you don't really want to walk around with those feelings inside of you.
Right.
And the short answer is, to the degree that you can kind of talk about them and get them off your chest, that sometimes helps to say, this is really, really distressing. And there probably is not anything I can really do, because what happened was, it's like us kind of, and I think what's interesting is, for Holocaust survivors, I would guess that this is how they feel about the Nazis. And we all sort of say we hate the Nazis, sort of, but since we didn't go through it necessarily, we don't necessarily have the visceral emotions when we talk about the Nazis, right? Whereas this, we literally went through, it's much more visceral. It's much more real. And so the feelings that get elicited are that much more intense. And it's that intensity of emotion that really doesn't feel very good. I would say, on the whole, usually those feelings do start to die down over time, at least the intense feelings. Just remember that we're still in it. And I think that's one of the hardest parts, is that, in talking about PTSD, we can't even talk about P, we're still in the T, right? We're still going through the trauma. We're still going through the crisis. It's still on every day. It's in our faces. Every day the feelings get like the fire gets turned up again, which makes it hard for it to go away. I would say that, to the degree to not judge yourself for feeling feelings that you find distasteful is also important. Like, it's kind of normal to be feeling those feelings, even if they don't seem to jive with our normal approach to life or to other human beings. So that's number one. Don't judge yourself for feeling feelings. We judge ourselves for our behaviors, not for our feelings. It's really, really important. Number two, those feelings will diminish over time, but right now they're being continually, again, the fire is continually being turned up every day. It's like you hear another thing, you're like, this is like, every day seems worse, right? In terms of the news that's coming out. So the fires are just, Okay, so that's also part of it, is that you haven't even been given a chance to put any distance between yourself and what happened. So it still feels very, very intense. And if it helps you to say, you know what, human beings don't do this, I'm hating objects, I'm hating demons, then that's not a bad way to reframe either, because, you know, I would say that they probably do lack Tselem Elohim, because creatures that are created in God's image wouldn't do this. So, you know, you can spin it however you like, but I would say that for now, certainly at the very least, do not judge yourself or criticize yourself for having these feelings. They should dissipate over time.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I think there was a question on the chat.
There is a question on the chat. It's from Judy Morgan. And how do you cope with all the anti-Semitism without feeling that we're going to another Holocaust?
So to the degree that we have the state of Israel, I think we all feel that, you know, at least the Jewish people are safe here. But you know, look, with the rise of anti-Semitism in America is very, very challenging, and it is the crisis that's facing American Jewry and Israeli Jewry by extension. I don't mean to say that we're not, and it's very frightening and disheartening. You know, I mean, I think we need to be on alert. I think everybody, the way to deal with anti-Semitism in America is to get active, and I think people are starting to, and you know, make sure Congress supports us. Make sure when you find out about anti-Semitic activities that are happening, become active. I mean, quite frankly, the one thing that the United States of America provides to everybody is freedom of speech, clearly. And we can exercise our freedom of speech just as much as everybody else. I think as Jews, we historically have not been the most activist people because we assume that we have justice on our side. And so we tended to be a little lackadaisical about political activism, certainly within the Orthodox community. And I think this is the time for political activism. And that is the way to, certainly in America, you can cope with that by becoming politically active and supporting Judaism in public, in Congress, everywhere, protests, marches, they're doing it, we should be doing it. But ultimately, we thank God we have the state of Israel. And I think that is the comfort for, at least for myself. I know when I see what's going on in the United States, I say, you know what, I got my real estate in before prices are going to skyrocket.
That's very close to my heart, Bella. We have another comment from Robin Epstein, and she says, Bella, thank you so much. Great advice. So happy that you are in Israel. And Bruce says hello.
Now that's a blast from Elizabeth past.
Yes. So I want to accentuate her thank you to you. And I feel that everybody here can take, if only one thing from what you said will be valuable, but I think there were many, many more things that you said. And I thank you for your time, for your information, for everything that you've given us. And I will just say that my Mahjong and Canasta are my solving the problem of socialization and commitment.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for having me. And if anybody wants to reach me offline, Rose has my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me directly.
And the other thing to add to this is this program has been recorded. If you want to refer people, I believe it can be found on YouTube at Rhonda Israel. Am I correct, Rhonda?
I'll send it out. I'll send a video link to as many people in the learning group as possible. And then Hadassah can advertise it from after that.
And Rhonda, I want to add that your learning group on Wednesday morning is exactly what Billa was referring to, as a commitment, a time every Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning to get together, to learn. And anyone who's in that group knows how creative you are and what a marvelous way that you present the information, and we all leave the class inspired.
Thank
So
I'd like to, thanks though. I'd like to, as a public service announcement for the Hadassah Women in the Lavona chapter. I would like to welcome and encourage everyone to come to class tomorrow at 10:30. I know that those of you who are with me every week know that at some point I had to explain that it was very difficult for me to teach, continue teaching the Shoftim as we were learning in class because of the terrible fighting, killing, destruction, hatred, etc. And it was too much for me personally. So I'm sure that Dr. Shanzer can understand that I had to reroute my teaching based on my own personal feelings about what was going on in my life, as well as what I was learning and teaching. So consequently, tomorrow, I would like to encourage everyone to come because I have really put my heart and soul into learning the Parsha HaShavua about Yosef and his coat of Technicolor Dream Coat, a very fun, entertaining, and meaningful class. So please don't miss tomorrow, ladies. And even if you don't always come to class, if you need the link to get in tomorrow, please join us tomorrow 10:30 for learning for a really special pre-Hanukkah enjoyable learning event. So thank you, Dr. Shanzer, for all that you said tonight, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow morning. Be well and be safe.
Let's hope. So vote.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shanzer. You were really so helpful to us, and really appreciate you being here.